The JFK Assassination, a radio broadcasting perspective. This is Steve Eberhardt. November 22nd, 1963, 50 years ago today. The JFK assassination was one of the most shocking, controversial, and world-changing moments in modern history. It was also one of the most shocking and world-changing moments in broadcasting. Indeed, the radio and television broadcasts of that event marked a moment in each that would change them forever. The day President Kennedy visited Dallas on November 22, 1963, was already a busy news day, to say the least. In those days, a presidential visit to a city was a major news item. A motorcade for the public through city streets in a major metropolitan area was even bigger news. On the day President Kennedy's visit to Dallas took place, local television and radio pooled their resources to cover the events. Local radio stations provided above and beyond normal news coverage on that day, and President Kennedy's speech scheduled at the Trade Mart after the motorcade was billed as a major address to the nation, which all local stations planned to carry live on the air. After the president landed at Love Field Airport in Dallas, he made his way through the streets of Dallas in an open convertible limousine specially built for such displays. This gave the public a very up-close and personal view of the president and allowed him to wave and, in some instances, converse with the public on the parade route. On this day, well over 200,000 such persons lined the streets of downtown Dallas to view the presidential motorcade and to get a live glimpse of their president. The motorcade through the most crowded portions of the parade route went very well, with a very enthusiastic crowd of well-wishers who appeared to have behaved well for the president's visit. This was the case until almost the very end of the motorcade. At Elm and Houston Streets in downtown Dallas, the motorcade began a descent down the street towards Stemmons Freeway, where the motorcade would travel to its final destination, the Trade Mart, for a luncheon and speech. They were only moments away when 3 bursts of gunfire erupted. One shot hit the president. He slumped. Then a third shot struck directly in the head. His head exploded in blood, brain matter, and skull material. His wife Jackie was only inches away from him. Those watching on the street side, some just a few feet away, dove for cover. Local newsmen who were among the crowd saw what happened. Many scrambled to get to a phone or back to their respective studios to file a report on the air. Pandemonium broke out. Police were rushing in every direction. The president's car rushed to Parkland Hospital. In a follow-up car in the motorcade, the United Press International reporter, Merriman Smith, grabbed a mobile telephone, rare in those days, and phoned in a report to the United Press International Dallas office. Moments later, on teletype machines in newsrooms across the nation and beyond, his cryptic bulletins began to print. 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade today in downtown Dallas. He is perhaps seriously, perhaps fatally injured. Astonished newsmen in radio and TV studios across the country, understanding the gravity of these such reports, ripped the wire copy off the machines and raced into on-air studios to get the broadcast of the bulletins underway. At the radio networks of NBC, CBS, and ABC in New York City, anchors and reporters were scrambling to get on the air as quickly as possible. At NBC, no anchor was nearby. All had gone to lunch. A producer and copy boy were the only people in the newsroom and saw the bulletin of the shooting and the subsequent flash on the news wire. A flash sent only in the event of a news item that is considered earth-shaking news mentioned Kennedy was seriously injured. Anchor or no anchor, the 2 men in the NBC newsroom knew they had to get on the air immediately. The producer, not normally on the air, went on the air with the first NBC News bulletin while other staffers attempted to locate an announcer or newsman.
Stations, this is a 30-second hotline bulletin talk-up. Just 25 seconds from now, we'll bring you a hotline bulletin dealing with the president. Several shots were fired near the president in Dallas. A hotline bulletin coming to you in 15 seconds. Stand by all NBC stations. A hotline bulletin in 10 seconds. A hotline bulletin in 5 seconds. This is an NBC News bulletin. Shots were fired near President Kennedy in Dallas. Here is a report from Robert McNeil, NBC News, with the presidential party in Dallas.
Several shots were fired as the President Kennedy's motorcade passed through downtown Dallas. Crowds screamed and lay down on the grass. As the motorcade went by, police broke away and began chasing an unknown gunman across some railroad tracks. It was not known if the shots were aimed at the president. Repeat, it is not known if the shots were aimed at the president. This is Robert McNeil, NBC News in Dallas, Texas.
And here is a flash from the Associated Press in Dallas. The Associated Press reports that the president was seriously wounded. This is not confirmed. This is a flash. Repeat, this is a flash from the Associated Press in Dallas. They report that the president was seriously wounded by an assassin's bullets. This is a unconfirmed report from the Associated Press. I repeat, the Associated Press reports from Dallas that President Kennedy was seriously wounded by assassin's bullets in Dallas. This has been a Hotline Bulletin report from NBC News. Stand by for later developments as they become available.
Clearly not a polished professional network anchor sound, but they got the information on the air. At CBS, news anchor Alan Jackson was in the newsroom and immediately broadcast over the air the latest bulletin.
We interrupt this program for a CBS Radio Net Alert Bulletin.
This is Alan Jackson reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York with a bulletin on an incident which just occurred in Dallas, Texas, where President Kennedy is visiting. President Kennedy and Governor John Connally of Texas were both hit by a would-be assassin's bullets as they toured downtown Dallas in an open automobile a short while ago. That is the latest word that has just come in from Dallas on United Press International. The Associated Press in its first report says that President Kennedy was shot just as his motorcade left downtown Dallas. Mrs. Kennedy, who was riding with him, jumped up and grabbed Mr. Kennedy and cried, "Oh no." The motorcade sped on. Riding in the same car with the president for this particular motorcade was Governor and Mrs. John B. Connally, the governor of the state of Texas. According to the last report, both the president and the governor were hit by the bullets. And now one more ad has come in. The president, his limp body cradled in the arm of his wife, was rushed to Parkland Hospital. The governor was also taken to Parkland. Clint Hill, a Secret Service agent assigned to Mrs. Kennedy, escorted the president into the hospital, and we are awaiting further word on his condition. We will repeat these details as they have come into us here in our New York News headquarters. A would-be assassin fired at the presidential automobile in Dallas a short while ago, hitting both President Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally. This is the latest we have at our CBS News headquarters in New York. We now resume our regularly scheduled program.
At ABC Radio Network, news anchor Don Gardner was standing at the teletype machine when the bulletin began printing, took him directly to the studio, and was the first of the radio networks to interrupt regular programming with the news events of the day in Dallas.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special bulletin from ABC Radio. Here is a special bulletin from Dallas, Texas. 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade today in downtown Dallas, Texas. To repeat, in Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade today. Here's a late report from United Press International. It says that the president, his limp body cradled in the arms of his wife, rushed into Parkland Hospital. The governor of Texas, John Connally, also taken to Parkland, and Clint Hill, a Secret Service agent assigned to Mrs. Kennedy, said, and I quote, "He is dead." That is what Clint Hill, a Secret Service agent assigned to Mrs. Kennedy, said today. He is dead. Now we return you to your regular program.
It was very apparent the ABC anchor was greatly affected by what he was reporting. In Dallas, the number one most listened to radio station at the time was KLIF 1190. A McClendon broadcasting station, KLIF was known for its top 40 rock and roll radio format, but was equally known for its top-rate news department. Indeed, the station was as proficient at news reporting as it was at entertaining. On that particular day, newsman Gary DeLon was on duty. At 12:30 p.m., he had just broadcast the half-hour headlines and turned the programming back to the disc jockey who was playing the top hits of the day. At about the same time, the shots were ringing out in Dealey Plaza, only blocks away from their studios. At approximately 5 minutes later, DeLon was alerted to what was going on. He spoke with us and described what happened.
I was supposed to join Gordon McClendon over at the Trademark, and I'd already written the copy, and something like, as if by omen, the ominous clouds rolled away and the canopy was taken away from the limousine, and the president proceeded downtown. I don't remember exactly what it was, but something like that. And I already had it written, and then all I was going to do was the headlines. And then that's when the hotline rang. And it was always a requisite in those days. Of course, you had those big reel-to-reels. And it was always a requirement that whenever the hotline rang, you started your recorder. And also, whenever that hotline rang, you asked who it was calling. And boy, to this day, I don't even know why. I guess because I wasn't that much of an experienced newsman. But when that hotline rang, I did not start my recorder. And neither did I ask who it was. And that was when the unidentified source said, "What do you know about shots being fired at the motorcade with Kennedy and Connally being hit?" Well, I was so stunned. I said, "I don't know, but I'll find out." And instead of saying, "Who is this? What do you know?" I was just in a state of shock. And he didn't elaborate, and he just hung up. And then that's when I called Dorothy Plimpton over at the police department, and she confirmed it, and then that's when we went with it on the air.
With that, DeLon signaled the DJ on duty, who put him on the air.
This KLIF bulletin from Dallas, 3 shots reportedly were fired at the motorcade of President Kennedy today near the downtown section. KLIF News is checking out the report. We will have further reports. Stay tuned.
With each minute, more details, scant at best, emerging as DeLon kept up with additional bulletins.
Here is a further report after we have just received word that shots have been fired at the Kennedy motorcade. We just talked with the police department. Here was that conversation.
Several persons arrived at Parkland, and no information is being given at this time.
But you did have reports of shots being fired.
We had reports, yes, sir.
KLIF News on route to Parkland Hospital to confirm the reports that someone had been wounded in the firing of shots in the Kennedy motorcade in downtown Dallas. Stay tuned to Cliff News.
Moments later, news director Joe Long called in from his news cruiser with a report over their two-way radio from downtown Dallas.
And now we take you to Joe Long in KLIF Mobile News Unit number 4 in downtown Dallas.
The latest information, and things are rather confused at this moment, shots definitely were fired at the presidential motorcade as it passed through downtown Dallas. All squads are converging code 3 in the area of Elm and Houston in downtown. There is a tentative description of the shooting suspect, a man, a white male, believed to be approximately 30 years old, reportedly armed with a .30 caliber rifle. How many shots were fired? How many persons, if any, were struck and wounded? We do not know yet. Very close-mouthed officials now clamping down on the entire story. We'll bring you what details are available just as quickly as they come into our possession. Joe Long, Cliff Mobile News Unit number 4, 1190 and out.
By this time, the news of the shooting was beginning to take over the airtime.
McDaniels with a KLIF Classic, and ladies and gentlemen, stand by at 1190 on your dial for further developments in the reported shooting during the motorcade of President Kennedy on his visit to Dallas, Texas.
Are you hoping that someday you'll find something that's really good for pimples and bad complexion? Search no more. Baker's Beauty Lotion is what you need, or money back.
And now another report from Joe Long in downtown Dallas.
Latest details on the chase and search in downtown Dallas. An unidentified man fired several shots from what apparently was a high-powered .30 caliber rifle at the presidential motorcade. So far, the authorities are not releasing details on who, if anyone, was hit by any of the bullets or how badly they were injured. Parkland Hospital being very closed-mouthed about the situation, but the search now centers at the area of Elm and Houston near the old Texas School Book Depository building, and there is a possibility that the would-be assassin is still inside that building. All available downtown units are converging at emergency speed to that area. The entire area has been blocked off. It is roped off now. No one allowed in or out as the search for this would-be presidential assassin continues in downtown Dallas. What had been a very smooth journey to Texas for the president and his wife and other officials, Vice President and Mrs. Lyndon Johnson, now has turned into another black smear. And we are keeping up to date on all details through the official police officer sources, and will bring you full details as soon as they're available. Joe Long, Cliff Mobile News Unit number 41190 out.
At this point, KLIF abandoned all normal programming and essentially turned into an all-news radio station. The news department took over the radio station and began continuous broadcasts of the news events of the day without interruption until midnight that night.
So now we'll switch you to the downtown area of Dallas, and this is Joe Long.
Here is the latest unconfirmed report we have, and we must stress that this is unconfirmed, but it comes from a very high-placed official who refuses to be quoted. But it is now reported that Governor Connolly and the President perhaps have been wounded in this assassin's attempt. It is an unofficial report that both the President and Governor Connolly were wounded in this shooting event in the downtown area during the passage of the motorcade. The automobile in which the president was riding reportedly sped out to Parkland Hospital, and we do not know whether Mrs. Kennedy and or Mrs. Connolly suffered any injury at all. The first report we had said that both of the men were lying prone in the automobile in the caravan limousine at the time it made its way rapidly to Parkland Hospital. We have no further details. Parkland Hospital is being placed almost off limits to reporters at this time, but those details that are available will be brought to you just as quickly as we possibly can. Very briefly recapping, there has been an assassination attempt in downtown Dallas. Shots fired from a high-powered rifle at the presidential car in the motorcade as it was en route to the trademark for a scheduled presidential speech. All of these security precautions that have been taken, and now this happens. And the police are converging on and surrounding the area of Elm and Houston, the old Texas School Book Exchange building, where they believe they may have trapped the would-be assassin. We'll bring you further details momentarily. Joe Long, Cliff Mobile News Unit number 41190, and out.
Gordon McClendon, the owner of KLIF, who had been at the Trade Mart where the president was scheduled to speak upon learning of the shooting, called in a report from the Trade Mart.
Gordon McClendon at the Trade Mart in Dallas. Here, the scene is of wild pandemonium as 2,000 guests waited anxiously for President Kennedy, Governor Connolly, and the Vice President. Now, rumors run rampant. No one here knows what has happened, but the rumors continue to circulate that the President and Governor Connolly both have been shot. And here at the Trade Mart, we have nothing but rumors and a wild scene of chaos. This is Gordon McClendon from the Trade Mart in Dallas.
Cliff continued to rely on their reporters' information and wire service news reports from United Press International, which was sending bulletins as fast as they could be transmitted. On one such dispatch from Merriman Smith, the UPI reporter at Parkland Hospital, he quoted Clint Hill, a Secret Service agent at the hospital. It is apparent that Gary DeLon at KLIF was reading it live on the air. You'll notice his pause at reading what had just been handed to him.
The latest report that we have from one press source, Clint Hill, a Secret Service agent assigned to Mrs. Kennedy, said he's dead as the president was lifted from the rear of the White House touring car. Mr. Kennedy was rushed to the Parkland Hospital emergency room. Other White House officials were in doubt as the corridors of the hospital erupted in pandemonium. The incident occurred at Elm and Houston in the downtown area as the motorcade wended its way through the region. Newsmen in the motorcade did hear the 3 bursts from the automatic rifle. It is impossible, and was so at the time, to tell where the chief executive was struck by the bullets. We are now in contact with one of our news units, and we are going to switch you now for another report from the downtown section of Dallas.
So long again, and Cliff Mobile News Unit number 4, and the police cordon and the widespread search net continues. We still do not know whether this would-be assassin is trapped in the building or in the area at all. The search continues. We're going to vacate this mobile unit momentarily, and we'll be back in touch with you just as quickly as possible. KLIF newsmen and mobile units spread throughout all the strategic spots covering this story. We'll bring you full details momentarily. Joe Long, Cliff Mobile News Unit number 4, 1190 and out.
There was confusion with conflicting reports on whether Kennedy was alive or not. One person quoted one thing, then another.
Acting White House News Secretary Malcolm Kilduff was asked whether the president was dead. He said, "I have no word now," and that is the word we are awaiting. I have no word now, the latest. Congressman Jim Wright of Fort Worth has just said that both President Kennedy and Governor Connally were seriously wounded in the attack, but were alive. This is the latest. Congressman Jim Wright of Fort Worth has said that both President Kennedy and Governor Connally were seriously wounded, but were still alive.
Some 30 minutes after the shooting at 1 o'clock, Cliff's news director Joe Long returned to the station to go on the air anchoring coverage, while Gary DeLon had the opportunity to help gather and report in the background.
Still no official word from Parkland Hospital. We were en route from Love Field, where we had described the arrival of the presidential party, and that is when the first word of the shooting came out. We have been in the deep downtown area, in the area of Elm and Houston, and the dragnet continues. So far, Parkland Hospital has not released an official statement on the condition of President Kennedy and Governor John Connally. We do know now, however, that both of these men were wounded in the assassination attempt, and the dragnet and search continues. We are finding these details slow in coming. We have many official and unofficial comments coming from various sources. But at this moment, let's summarize it this way. As the presidential motorcade made its way through downtown Dallas, at least 3 shots rang out in the vicinity of Elm and Houston. And one child reportedly was a witness to the shooting. A young colored boy said that as he heard the first shot, he looked up at the 4th floor window of the old Texas Schoolbook Exchange building and saw a man leaning from the window, and then he fired at least 2 more shots. The report we had from witnesses at the scene said that both the president and Governor Connally were lying prone in the presidential limousine as it sped to Parkland Hospital. From Parkland, Congressman Jim Wright of Fort Worth says both Kennedy and Connally were seriously wounded but are still alive. However, we must stress that this is an unofficial report. It is not a medical report.
In the moments after the shooting was made known at the Dallas Trade Mart, KLIF's Gordon McClendon called in a live report, then commandeered a Dallas police officer to give him an express ride to the Cliff Studios a few miles away. Amazingly, the Dallas officer complied. Upon arrival, McClendon went directly to the studio and began co-anchoring with newsman Joe Long. McClendon was not only the owner of the radio station, but often would assist in reporting on major news stories. A man of amazing knowledge and talent, he could have easily been a network news correspondent in his own right.
Gordon McClendon has just returned from the Trade Mart. The scene had all been so beautifully set there for the president's arrival, the luncheon, and his speech this afternoon. Gordon, what was the effect on those some 2,000 people waiting there?
Stunned, of course, Joe, and a wild scramble for transportation out of the Trade Mart, particularly by reporters from throughout the United States seeking to get transportation some way, somehow, to Parkland Hospital. By the time we left, which was approximately 10 minutes after the shooting, the giant Trade Mart had been more than half emptied of the 2,000 people who had been assembled there to see the president, the vice president, and the remainder of the luminaries. Rumors ran rampant. At first, it was thought that Vice President Johnson had also been shot in the attack. I can only say that no one at the Trade Mart knew very much, but now everyone is fully aware.
News reports and wire service reports continued nonstop into the Cliff Studios, and Gordon McClendon and Joe Long continued to anchor coverage. At this point, there were strong rumors concerning the fate of the president being mentioned by unofficial sources.
We are in direct contact. We have been unable yet to verify the rumors, and to this point they are strictly rumors that the president is dead. We will not know until the word comes through officially, but there have been strong indications that the president has expired. But again, we repeat, it is unofficial. President Kennedy and Governor John Connally of Dallas, of Texas, having been cut down by assassin's bullets today at lunch. They were shot as they toured downtown Dallas in an open car. Specialists are arriving at the hospital, which I might mention is a scene of wild pandemonium. As we were coming from the Trade Mart a moment ago in a Dallas police car, there was a call for 20 additional police units at Parkland Hospital. And incidentally, on the 5th floor of the downtown building from which the president and the governor were shot, they have now discovered empty rifle hulls.
At this point, there are other press sources that are reporting on the rumors of the death of the president. With no official statement by any authoritative figure, Cliff continues to mention the rumors while awaiting further word.
Cliff Hill, a Secret Service agent assigned to Mrs. Kennedy, said as the president was lifted from the rear of the White House touring car at Parkland Hospital, he's dead. However, that again comes into the category of an unconfirmed statement. We can only give you unconfirmed statements at this point. There are strong indications that the president has expired, but there has been no bulletin to that effect, and as Joe has told you, the last rites and sacrament have definitely been administered.
At exactly 1:38 p.m. Central Time, United Press International sends its second flash of the day, which reads simply, Flash, President dead. 10 bells sounded on the teletype to alert stations of the flash. While Gordon McClendon is speaking, Joe Long hears the bells, looks over at the teletype machine, rips the paper off the printer, interrupts Gordon, and airs the official word of the death of the president.
Well, of course, the major attention is being focused upon the condition of the president. No one yet has any authoritative report upon the nature of the wounds to Governor Connally. Bullet wounds were plainly visible in Connally's chest, so we know that he was shot in the chest. His condition, however, remains more of a mystery than that of the President of the United States. The president is clearly, gravely, critically, and perhaps fatally wounded. There are strong indications that he may already have expired, although that is not official. We repeat, not official. But the extent of the injuries to Governor Connally is a closely shrouded secret at the moment.
President Kennedy is dead, Gordon. This is official word.
The president is dead. The president, ladies and gentlemen, is dead at Parkland Hospital in Dallas.
What for a few brief moments was a carefully guarded hope was suddenly dashed with the astonishing finality of the news flash. It was official. The president was dead, assassinated on the streets of Dallas. The rest of the day, weekend and days ahead would be nonstop news covering the aftermath of the tragedy of the death of the president, the swearing in of the new president aboard Air Force One at Love Field in Dallas, the reports of a suspect being arrested, and the mayhem that went with the hundreds of reporters from across the country and world as they descended upon Dallas to report back to their respective newspapers, magazines, television, and radio networks, and individual stations. Sunday morning would bring the shooting of the prime suspect, Lee Harvey Oswald. Then on Monday, the funeral of the president. The nation was in deep mourning for a long time. Many questions remain, many theories over the years, some of which continue today, some 50 years later. From a broadcasting standpoint, it was a moment that, for those involved in covering the story, will never be forgotten. Newsman Gary DeLon reflects on that.
When you are doing things like that, sometimes you don't think. You just do it like a robot. It doesn't sink in until much later, after you've read all that stuff. I was watching Cronkite, and he'd take off his glasses and he tells you about the choke up. Well, that's where I was on radio, and there may have been some hesitations there. I mean, you're fighting to maintain your composure and not to put a tear in your voice or.
For many of the reporters covering the story that day, it didn't sink in till well after the microphones were turned off. The gravity of which they reported was overwhelming to many once they realized it. Some made a name for themselves. Many were thrust onto the national scene merely for being in the right place at the right time. Some local Dallas newsmen actually got jobs at the networks in New York as a direct result of their skills at reporting this job on that day in Dallas. Some parlayed it into a big-time career. Others, disgusted by the day's events, chose another line of work. One thing for sure, It was the story of a lifetime. And in some ways, with all the uncertainty and unanswered questions, it is still today. The JFK Assassination, a radio perspective, has been a presentation of Eberhardt Broadcasting. I'm Steve Eberhardt.